You're good. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our planning meeting. It's Monday, October the 30th, 2023. For those that are joining with us virtually, we welcome you. For those that are with us in person, we thank you for coming. I would remind everyone, communication devices are to be put on vibrate or shut off, please, during the meeting. We acknowledge that this land on which we are gathered today is part of the ancestral land of the Chippewa, Ottawa, and Potawatomi peoples, referred to collectively as the Anishinaabe. Through the connection of the Anishinaabe with the spirit of the land, water, and air, that we recognize their unique cultures, conditions, and values. Together as treaty people, we have a shared responsibility to act with respect to the environment that sustains all life, affecting the future for those generations to come. Council, I would remind you that if you feel you have a pecuniary interest, you declare it at the appropriate time. Clerk, we're going to go to item 4 on the agenda. Are there any delegations tonight?
No, not at this time, your worship.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any business arising from the previous meeting?
Not that I'm aware of, your worship.
Thank you. Okay, council, let's go to item 6, staff reports. 6.1, I have a motion by Councillor Van Claveren, seconded by Councillor Wolvette, that the report by Randy Burke, planner, and Ken Melanson, manager of planning and development services, County of Lambton, regarding short-term rentals, official plan and zoning bylaw amendment be received, and that council directs staff to prepare the required official plan and zoning bylaw amendments for the required public meeting. Are there any questions on that? Ms. Burke?
Thank you, Your Worship. So I guess I'll just say a couple of things about the report, just very briefly. So yeah, we put in our report recommending that you be directed to move forward with a official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment processes. We know that in the previous meeting, council hoped that those wouldn't necessarily be necessary for the short-term rental bylaw. However, there are policies within the official plan, kind of specifically, that will require an amendment to be done for consistency with what we are putting into the bylaw based on previous council discussions. And it would be the same with the zoning bylaw amendment to ensure that the definitions are consistent and just that all the legislation is consistent together with what we're putting in the bylaw. Along with that recommended direction, staff have provided council with a draft short-term rental bylaw. The draft bylaw presented is based on a number of departments' work, especially the clerk's department, building services, and planning. So I just wanted to acknowledge that very briefly. The bylaw presented is based on the shell of Lambton Shores short-term rental bylaw. However, it has been updated to what was discussed at the September 25th planning meeting. So you'll see that reflected, right? Some of the policies there. And finally, it's important to note that it has not gone through legal yet. We wanted to provide council the opportunity to comment, discuss, have us the opportunity to provide any answers to questions that may be had. And then it would be sent to legal. So with that, yeah, if there's any comments or questions, multiple departments are here, so hopefully we can answer them.
I'm sensing there probably will be the odd question or two.
Yes.
First of all, I want to thank you and the whole team that put this together. I know you guys have been working very hard lately on it to get it to us, and we do appreciate it very much. I'm going to open it up for questions from council. We'll start on my left. Deputy Mayor, would you like to go first?
Not really, but I will.
Okay.
So, great report, a lot of work put into it. But last week, I guess it was the beginning of last week or till the end of the week before, I read that the municipality of Lakeshore, it passed a bylaw to not allow STRs in the municipality. So I've been thinking a lot about that, and I'm just going to suggest that maybe we should not allow STRs in our municipality. Because in any residential development, no, I shouldn't just say in our municipality, but in any residential development, unless they are owner occupied. This would eliminate a lot of complaints that residents have that live on those streets with STRs and Airbnbs, the noise, the parking, the late night parties and stuff like that. And so I think the expenses of a bylaw enforcement officer would also be eliminated. In my mind, these are commercial endeavors and need to be zoned and taxed as commercial. They are comparable to a motel or hotel and need to be situated appropriately, not in the middle of a residential community. So when owner occupied, there should be, they should require enforcement and monitoring issues. But it should save enforcement dollars. So I would like our council to consider that. I know you've put, don't get me wrong, I know you've put a lot of work and effort into this, and I wish I had thought of it earlier, but the Lakeshore municipality really, sort of instigated this, so that's all for now.
Ms. Burke, either you or Ms. Nada want to respond to that, or Mr.
Through your worship, maybe I will, because I've just pulled up Lakeshore's website related to that. First comment I'll make is that in Ontario, there is case law that says you cannot prohibit a use. So the first question I would have is they may have passed a bylaw. Question becomes, was it appealed?
Okay, yeah.
And I don't know the answer. Even if the bylaw wasn't appealed and it comes into force, that doesn't mean that it's still not subject to someone challenging in court. And if it does fall within that case law, chances are a court would strike that down. So I would suggest that as part of the legal review, that is a question that we will put to the municipality's legal team about whether to prohibit. I'm going to also suggest that we put to them the question that you've suggested, because my understanding is that that would not be a prohibition. It's allowing,
Exactly.
subject to these conditions. So I think both are valid questions that when we send this forward, keeping in mind, council, this is a starting point. This is still going to be subject to public discussion. You will also have an opportunity to suggest changes or even direct changes if that's council's wish. But I'm just looking at the legal framework. I don't see how a bylaw like that would be able to withstand a challenge.
Even owner occupied? If you're allowing them,
That part,
you're allowing them.
that part, I think it might, yet again, I would want some commentary from your legal team, because as I said, that to me would not be a prohibition.
Right.
It would be enabling it subject to a rule. But prohibition, I suspect, would not.
I agree.
Thank you. That's it for now,
Yes,
Deputy.
thank you.
Councillor Van Claveren.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I might start with a question through you, Mr. Mayor. Just in maybe a legal question, Ken, for yourself. I'm a lawyer. Sort of. My question was, I've just lost it, but it'll come back to me. Away.
Keep talking.
Maybe I'll dial back and I'll start somewhere else. And then it'll come to me. Our community, as we know, has a lot of businesses within our residential areas. Most people got a side hustle of something on the go. They're cutting hair, they're washing cars, doing a bit of construction, you name it. There's just a million things you can do out of your home, which is fantastic. That's the pulse of our economy here in Plympton-Wyoming, is entrepreneurial people. Then there's the other folks that see an opportunity to generate some income, maybe offset some costs. Still have some experiences along the lake, for instance. They just can't be there all the time. There's lots in our community that own cottages, short-term rentals in other communities. So we certainly know it's happening, it's vibrant, it's generations old here in Plympton-Wyoming. It's certainly something we need not be afraid of, that's for sure. We can't make decisions based on worst case scenario all the time. We've got to take that into account and allot for it, make sure our owners are properly insured with lots and lots of liability at their expense and provide proof to us of that. Still haven't remembered that question.
I'm glad.
That was an awful long.
So in spirit of that, I think this is something we can definitely work with. For me, keeping it super simple and affordable are two key principles to that. And as I mentioned a few times, there's contractors in place that are already doing this on multiple properties in our community and other communities. It's highly effective. It's a smooth running machine. It's bringing lots of visitors to our community. They're enjoying our towns and our neighborhoods and spending money here and coming back year after year. That question is completely still eluded me, but it will come back sometime tonight, I'm sure.
Oh,
But I did just jot down a few simple little dynamics. We're proposing some kind of a license or some kind of a registration and arriving at the appropriate fee that's not too high, but high enough to qualify people. That they're genuine, that they're legitimate, and that they have the means to invest in this and handling it properly. Of course, lots of security information. Again, the liability, and then regulations and rules and that are simple, straight to the point, and things that can be monitored. That's all I got for now.
Okay, I'm sure you'll think of that.
Eventually.
If you do, just let me know.
I'll give my tape out.
Councilor Wolbett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think John was my spokesman. I think he's just brought up a lot of the stuff that I certainly had on my mind. I know the one thing, and I've sent emails accordingly, is clearly wanting to understand the definitions and legalities around commercial corporations, that type of stuff. And obviously this meeting tonight, that's what part of this is for you to go forward and maybe get some legal, because I tell you, I don't know the answers, who we can restrict, who we can't restrict. But I do know that we have to be consistent and fair with everybody. And I think, out there, and John mentioned some of it, there's all kinds of businesses going on that helps the community. There's people making living up there, cutting hair and stuff like that in their homes. As far as your bylaw goes, I find that you've did a lot of work on it, and I'm not going to belittle it in any which way, because it kind of covers everything. I call it the shotgun effect. You fire it off, and you see what sticks, and hopefully it's the good stuff that sticks. And when we're talking about parking and noise and all that. One thing I do find with the bylaw, that if the residents of this community, especially out along the lake, if they had to follow this bylaw that you're recommending, it'd be pretty quiet out there. Because I know this is just for STRs, but when you're out along that lake and there's lots of cottages and they're not short-term rentals, a lot of this stuff goes on, parking, all the above, which you're kind of restricting STRs. The one thing that I really have to mention, and I know we had a letter on it, but we got asked this question right from the get-go, and that is about what are commercial operations doing in residential neighborhoods? I mean, these are residential neighborhoods and the owner's not there. It's all in your bylaw how to solve some of that problems, but I get it. Like if you're in a residential neighborhood and you got 3 or 4 houses there that are being rented out on a nightly basis. Yeah, parking it. You really ask yourself, what, this is a residential neighborhood. What the heck is going on? If you moved any other kind of commercial operation in there, you probably wouldn't be allowed. So I'm just going to stop there and until we find out legally what we can and can't do. No sense making a bunch of rules and we find out that it's not legal to do so. So I guess the other thing I'll say too, like there's people in this community depend renting out a room in their house or 2. They depend on it for their income, for their taxes. So I know that's one thing that Nettie's talking about here, and I really appreciate that because it's other communities have done it. I heard that owner occupied. That's the words they use, owner occupied, and I think it's something that we have to consider. I know your bylaw has it in there where people got to be available within 30 minutes and all that kind of stuff, but still not the same as owner occupied. But when you're talking a residential area, that's where things start to, get a little crazy. So I'll listen to the rest of my colleagues and see what their thoughts are.
Okay, thank you, Counselor. Counselor Rodriguez.
Thank you. So I just want to say I'm glad that despite all the unique challenges initially faced by this council soon after coming into office, that we have been able to get to this point with short-term rental. And I would like to thank staff for getting us here. Our guidance and direction has not been to prohibit short-term rentals, but to try to work towards the most fairest and balanced approach. Our goal is to have a program in place that ensures our short-term rentals are operating within the applicable bylaws and practices of Plympton-Wyoming. Such bylaws include animal control, fireworks, open air burns, parking, property standards, weight and snow removal. These can differ somewhat between communities, so it is important to make sure that information is being conveyed to renters by way of this proposed licensing program. It is the bylaws that govern how we are expected to abide as permanent residents. And our out-of-town guests should be expected to follow the same laws without bias. It continues to be important to listen to all residents, both neighboring properties of short-term rentals and the renters alike, in order to have a better understanding of how we can best allow them to coexist. For the most part, I believe we're close to accomplishing this, but I do have some concerns on a few of the clauses in the proposed bylaw. Under the licensing requirements, insurance with the 2 million liability limit is common practice. Naming a municipality as additionally insured is not, and no other jurisdiction has this clause. Additional insured is used to protect the insured property owner. For example, if an individual organization uses a municipal facility to host an event, then the property owner typically will make it a condition of the individual organization to provide a certificate of insurance naming the municipality as additional insured before approving use of this facility. Another example would be contractors performing work on a municipally owned property. There are no businesses, home-based or otherwise, that would be required to add the municipality to name them as additional insured on that business in order to operate a business in their jurisdiction if the business is not operating on municipally owned properties. The use of additional insured could apply between the owner of the property and the tenant or the renter of the property, but the municipality is neither the owner or renter of these properties. Asking for a site plan to be drawn to scale could run a homeowner upwards of $2,000, making this prohibitive. How often would this be asked for? Are the costs going to be incurred annually by the property owner? Normally, a to-scale site plan is reserved for new development or major alterations to an existing property to have an accurate assessment of impacts of the site on other properties or features. The majority of other jurisdictions only require a hand-drawn site plan, not to scale. Under regulations, in regards to item C, regarding a short-term rental is equipped with a landline telephone for use seems antiquated. Due to the prohibited costs of traditional landlines asking for this provision, I feel it unnecessary, and no other jurisdiction uses this clause. Many homes do not have traditional landline connections in the age of wireless technology, and or servicing traditional landlines has for the most part become obsolete. VoIP services through internet can be very unreliable and do not have the ability in emergency services to identify where the call is coming from, because most of these services piggyback off of other unidentifiable services. They also increase the vulnerability of internet services. It is a widely accepted understanding that individuals use wireless personal cellular devices to communicate. These devices, unlike VoIP over landline, will provide location tracking abilities in a wide variety of forms. Under item O, I believe, no conversations or complaints have ever been communicated to this council about the use of outdoor pools and hot tubs. If these are amenities to the use of the home, then that should remain at the purview of the property owner when and how they wish to offer these amenities. I envision a couple returning from a family reunion or other event and wish to wind down and relax in a pool or hot tub during their vacation time away from the wee ones, or an out-of-town worker returning from a late shift who might, excuse me, find it therapeutic to enjoy some hot tub time. This should never be prohibited to those seeking enjoyment of their rental. If uses were defined to prohibit parties or events from happening, this could mitigate noise and nuisances from occurring with such amenities. When referring to noises and disturbances, again, I would like to reiterate, in any such clauses made in referral to this and other STR bylaws also make reference to existing municipal noise bylaws. I believe in the absence of having a noise bylaw, limiting uses on the property will mitigate many concerns of the public, which have included large gatherings, multiple vehicles taking up roads, and larger crowds sometimes lead to more noise. The maximum occupancy shall include guests. This is also not found in the overwhelming majority of SDRs. I see examples here of how this may be too prohibitive. Like a family has come into town for a funeral, of which many just did that this past weekend. You invite another family over to visit, to catch up and share stories, maybe since they may not have seen each other, will not see each other again until the next funeral, or hopefully a wedding instead. Again, this is another example of why uses may be the more beneficial way to go here. In regards to fees, are we going to discuss those separately?
We will be discussing fees, yes.
Separately. Okay, from our comments. Okay, that was it.
Well, I just didn't know if you wanted anyone to respond to those. this
Yes, I was
time, or-
just gonna. That's quite a list, Counselor.
Sorry. Well, it seemed like it.
It was. So would anybody, Ms. Burke, Ms. Nada, Mr. Hanson?
I think we'll take the list back. I mean, we're recording this meeting. We recorded the last meeting, which made it easier for us to go back to make sure that we were trying to cover everything off. We'll go back through your list and have a look. Ultimately, at the end of the day, this draft bylaw will come back before council through the required public meeting, through the planning process. Council can then give us direction if there's further changes that need to be made. What we're doing today is giving you a glimpse of what the starting point is. we still have to send this through legal review. Your legal team may come back and say there are things that need to change. So I just want council to understand that the bylaw that may show up for the public meeting may not look the same because of that legal review. This is the starting point.
Well, that, we'll come back to the fees after. Mr. Rodriguez, Councilor Vacy?
Yes, your worship, thank you. Yeah, going through it, it's a great starting point. I thought you guys did very well. One question I've got is, we've got in here about being able to be on site or by a phone call within 30 minutes. Is there something we can add that be on site when requested? So I could still be in Toronto and call you back in 30 minutes. I've met the bylaw. I think if we're gonna have local representation, you know, within an hour's to get on site.
We'd have to review the bylaw, but there might be a separate section, because the intent of what council told us was that they had to return our phone call or return our contact within a half an hour, but they need to be on site within an hour. So.
So is that in there, the hour part? Cause I couldn't find it. Not saying it isn't there.
Your worship,
Yes.
it's not, sorry, Adam, or sorry.
We're all
we-
running through
we
it in
did-
our.
Well, that's what I.
So that the intent, I believe behind it, which could be changed with the wording, is that you. The bylaw officer will call you and say, depending on the situation, you need to be here. But it could be something that could potentially be fixed with a phone call. But that could be changed within the wording. But I think we did change it to the 30 minutes because we felt that. That
Yeah,
was
I agree 100%.
that allowing an hour, because an hour could be quite far, where 30 minutes is still, you're at least in the area if you're gonna make it. That was what.
Right,
staff
but
had said.
according to this, a phone call and we're done.
Yeah,
It's more than that, and you say, no, we need you on site because there's an issue here.
yeah,
I think we need to put a timeline on that as well, so that there's a bit of urgency to get them there, right? So that you're not standing there for 3 hours waiting.
yeah, so.
Now the neighbors are all upset and the fight started and the whole bit.
Sorry for you, sorry.
Ms. Burke, and then First Class has a question.
Yeah, so that's what I was trying to get at. I think that was the intent of what we had written, but the wording can definitely be worked with to make sure there's no confusion for the public or staff or bylaw, whoever's doing it.
We can certainly flag it once we get
Yeah.
the legal review done.
Ms. Corcha?
Thank you, Your Worship. I was just gonna suggest that, yeah, it would be the bylaw officer would probably, I don't know, you can put a certain number on it, like. If the house is on fire, you gotta be here and, you know, right away. I think it depends on the situation. If you wanna put an hour in there, but it would be the bylaw officer's judgment, I think. You've at least called me in 30 minutes, but now this is what's happening. Get here now, you know, I'll see you tomorrow morning, so you can deal with the garbage, or like, it depends on what it is, but totally wording can be more descriptive. I just don't wanna be so descriptive, then the bylaw enforcement officer doesn't have that
Flexible.
flexibility depending on the situation.
We've certainly made a note of it. So when it comes back from legal review, we'll have, let's look at it.
That was the only thing I found in there, and I'm with everybody on the corporate thing, that somehow that we can keep, you know, the local guy renting out his cottage, make some money so he can afford it, no problem. The guy from, even if he's from here and owns 7 of them out in the lake and is just making money off them, then it's a business and should be treated as such. That's all I have. Everything else has been answered.
Okay, Counselor? Counselor Bojan?
Hey, your worship.
That is Counselor Bojan there, isn't it?
It is, yeah, I look a little different. Thank you. I just have a couple questions. I guess my first one, at the risk of sounding a broken record and just asking for clarification. Because there's several municipalities that don't do official plan, they don't do zoning changes, and they strictly stick with the licensing program. I'm just wondering what specifically we're dealing with that makes us different. Because when I went through the official plan, it says that the town may establish a licensing framework. So is there a specific, I'm not sure what I'm missing, and maybe that's why it has to be as rezoning.
So through your worship, there were policies that were added into the official plan during the the 5-year review. Because the council at the time was concerned that there wasn't anything in place. So the whole concept was to put some policy in place. Even if it was a stopgap measure or just a placeholder. Well, placeholder, stopgap is a better way to describe it. Until a licensing system was in place. The challenge is that the policies that you have, so the licensing part isn't the actual issue. It's some of the other policies that then speak to the number of bedrooms and don't provide a framework for this potential change in parking requirements and a few other little things. So the idea is to simply simplify the official plan to really point to this framework and align it all in one so that there's no conflict, because what you don't want to have is these placeholder policies that don't really connect back to what is now before you or what could be before you. Because remember, there's still public engagement that has to happen. So I am by no means thinking that what we have here is going to be what gets theoretically approved. So we want to just take that section of the official plan and rework it to just specifically speak to, you know, this framework is about, you know, renting out rooms within certain types of building topography, you know, single detached, semi-detached, that sort of thing. Take out, or I should say, keep the framework of you're going to establishing a licensing system and make it that simple. Rather than get into these other placeholder things that aren't really relevant anymore.
But doesn't it already say that? Because it says the town may establish through a comprehensive zoning bylaw or a municipal licensing framework appropriate provisions related to the nature, scale, and density of short-term vacation rentals that are and blah, 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 blah. So it feels like it already points to that. And the only reason I'm stuck on this, just for, so council understands, is because if we get down the road and we go through the whole rezoning and all of this, it's a lot easier to change a licensing bylaw than it is to go back to the drawing board again. So I'm just, and again, I might be missing something, because when I read the official plan, it already points to a future licensing framework.
The challenge, counselor, is that when you get down into the second piece in terms of the policies, there's some things within this framework that are actually not going to work. So for example, policy F1, the town may on an area specific or case by case basis prohibit STRs in areas that are not considered to be consistent with this plan. Well, this framework is really about enabling them, but not enabling it in commercial areas, because that's more of a commercial enterprise. This is about short-term vacation rentals in certain residential forms. You've also got, you actually have a placeholder policy that actually achieves, I think, what the deputy mayor was talking about, any short-term rental. Oh, sorry, I misread that. But then you have a policy here that says any short-term rental not operated by residents permanently residing in the dwelling may only be licensed for such use if the use is permitted by a comprehensive zoning bylaw or is a legally non-conforming use. Like, you're getting into some inconsistencies in language of policy that really just would need to be cleaned up to make it not challenging, because what we don't want to do is have a licensing system that does one thing and then policy that may suggest another that could open a door to a challenge.
So to clarify, then, are we not doing rezoning changes? We're just changing our LP to basically get rid of all the stuff that was added as they refer to the licensing bylaw?
You're changing your official plan and you're adding definitions into your zoning bylaw to make sure that you have as enforcement tools the capability to go under the zoning bylaw as well as the licensing bylaw. Well, so it's giving council the full option from the enforcement side, but it's not getting into, you need a rezoning to do this. Sorry, I saw Mr. Sabine.
So just to clarify, staff is very aware of council's wishes to avoid an OPA's at BA due to timelines and everything. We sat down with planning and went through the official plan. And there was a number of sections in the official plan that actually went against what council wished for during our planning exercise. So to develop the licensing bylaw, we would have to either develop it in conjunction with those items in the official plan, or we'd have to amend the official plan. So the brainstorming session that we had, we felt that council had full majority of support for those ideas, and that's why OPA was required. The ZBA, Lance is correct, there does requirement as well, due to inconsistencies and definitions. Our CBO, our chief building official, recommended that we do a zoning bylaw amendment, as it would make our licensing bylaw more enforceable. As Corinne was worried that if we did not, it could lead to challenges, because there'd be different definitions for parking and other items in the zoning bylaw, and that would not be able to allow us to enforce those requirements that council put forth during their brainstorming session.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple other things, then I'll move on from that. One is getting, I know it hasn't gone illegal yet, but if we can make sure we get legal advice on the grandfathering clause, if we have to include that. That would be
Flag that one.
yeah. The bedroom limits. Without getting too nitpicky in actual bylaw, the bedroom limit one confused me, because if your maximum capacity is 10, so you can have 100 bedrooms, you still can only have 10 people. I'm not sure why we're limiting 4 bedrooms, because I might, or not me, but someone might have a 5-bedroom cottage and still only want to rent to 10 people, but they have a 5-bedroom cottage. So I'm just wondering why that piece is in there if we have the max occupancy calculation.
Clerk?
I believe my coworkers, was it not given at the last brainstorming session that council wanted a 4-bedroom max?
Yes, that was my understanding.
We did talk about.
Yeah.
And that's, I think we talked about it in that context that you're stating though. Whereas, because I thought about that too, with the, you know, 5 bedrooms, what do you have to do, block one off? Because you have a capacity limit.
That was the direction, I think.
And we did discuss that, and we did
Yeah.
note that if there is a 5th bedroom, it just doesn't get used, so it had been discussed to the
Yeah,
best
if
of
they
our.
had a 5th and you only want 4, then they lock the door. But if you don't want 4, then that can, like, council can direct that be changed, right?
Right, he gets to sleep.
I just think if we're capping it out at 10 people anyways, I don't know if the number of bedrooms matters.
Yeah, I might like my own. I want my own bedroom. It's smaller.
I think that is a good point. I think maxing the people versus the bedrooms is probably a better idea to avoid confusion.
If I may, the one reason I believe that we were talking about maxing was we don't want a 2-bedroom house with 10 people in it, though. That is part of our, just figuring out the language though, for sure.
Yeah, cause I think the capacity one is already in here, and I think it says a maximum occupancy of 2 people per bedroom plus 2, to a maximum of 10, I think is what it says. So I think that should cover it. You can't have more than 10. You can have 7 bedrooms, you still only have 10.
It's a good point, Counselor, and what this. I wanted to add this comment. This goes to show you how many eyes of staff have been on this bylaw. And now you're seeing it. And now there's other questions, right? So.
And then I'm almost done here, and then the.
We're still on.
I know you don't want to get into fines yet, or fees yet though, right?
Fees and fines. You want.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that next. So you just hang on to that if you can, Counselor.
Yeah, because to bleed into that is just, I'm worried that there's no financial implications in this report yet. 'Cause I think we're getting to a point now where we're approving a bylaw and we have no idea how we're gonna pay for it.
So we're gonna come back to that. I'm going back to Counselor Van Claveren to see if he remembered. what he-
It got answered, which was
Oh,
kind
it
of
did?
cool. Yeah,
Okay, we're good.
yeah, we did.
Okay, back to fees.
Crystal ball app worked perfectly.
Yeah, clerk.
I know we answered some other counselors' questions, so I just wanted to answer one of Counselor Rodriguez's. if that's
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
just about the landline. We had concerns. We talked about this quite a bit. Cell phone service is not available in a lot of areas. So from a health and safety perspective, how do you ensure that they, and like you said, VoIP doesn't always work. You can't get the 911. So if someone came from wherever and came to the lake and didn't know, they don't have emergency service. I know it is a cost. We understand, we all do that, but
Mhm.
for safety.
So I think that onus is on the property owner. Have you ever had one complaint of something like that. I've never seen it in any other SDR,
Sorry, what do you mean by a complaint?
that somebody wasn't able to communicate.
I haven't, I don't know if the fire department has, but we all know we go on the lake and we don't have cell
So
service,
I live
right?
on the
So-
lake, so I appreciate that.
Yeah,
But you do, because you have the availability of tech. So, regardless of having cell service. It always works.
Could we change them?
Did that phrase come from an existing bylaw, or is that something that we put in due to our concerns with the reception on the lake?
Due to,
I think it was concerns too. We did mention as well that we don't know that everyone has a cell phone. I mean, we assume they do.
I think that's.
It's just kind of a,
Counselor Basie?
Could we just not state that they must have a reliable access to 911? You cell service, your VoIP or
Or,
landline?
or ensure that the renter does. Be an option.
So you would say, I have to, if I want to come to your area, I have to have a phone that works along the lake or something like that.
Well, then sure, yeah, ensure that they have the ability to communicate.
I think most people, when they come, wouldn't have a clue. We don't have.
That's why you make them aware of it. I think it should be part of the renter's code.
Yes, Ms. Lang.
If I may, so when we were talking about the landline telephones, I think another issue was a lot of the times when people are renting, they don't know where they are. They don't know the address, so if they go and call 911 on a cell phone, it sometimes can't be tracked. So at least if it's a landline telephone, it's linked to a 911 address, and it's easy for dispatch to know exactly where they are. So that was another reason why we included this. We can explore other options, but I think it's a little more guaranteed for us, and no one's going to say, well, your bylaw says this, but the renter didn't provide it. I think it takes a lot of onus off of us if when we go into a site inspection, we look, yep, there's a telephone, check.
So going back to my statement, a lot of properties don't have traditional landlines that would be able to know the location. And a lot of homes don't even have traditional landlines that could provide that. They aren't built with it anymore. So the VoIP service becomes an option, which doesn't provide tracking, whereas a cell phone does.
Yeah, what, Counselor Wolbett and then Mr. Sabansky.
Yeah, it's an interesting discussion, but I think we're going too far, telling them they gotta have a land-based phone. You're in a house out, they don't want a telephone, they don't have a telephone. They don't want internet, they don't have internet. Simple as that. So to go in and tell them you can rent a room out and you gotta have a telephone in there and pay 25 or 30 bucks a month for a telephone. I mean, that's ridiculous. Most people have cell phones nowadays, and like you say, a lot of people, including myself, are certainly looking at getting rid of my land phone for the simple fact is it never gets used. But I just think it's going too far. You go rent a house out there, no telephone in it. You want to put one in, you put one, but when you're renting, you don't. It's not a requirement. Whether short-term rental or long. I just think we're going too far, getting down to that kind of detail.
I do call you on your landline, Counselor.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, that's good. You don't want to use the telephone.
Mr. Sabansky.
So just. We're not necessarily intended to come out with the final bylaw from this meeting. This is to give council their first preview, and to public their first preview. And we wanted to make this information available for everyone prior to moving on to the OPA and ZBA. It wasn't our intent to fine tune this bylaw. It was the intent to gather your opinion, and then through the open house process, gather the public's opinion. Once we have that opinion together, we can amend the bylaw into its final form. And then once we know exactly what we're enforcing, it was our intent to bring back the bylaw in its final form, along with cost estimates in regards to enforcement. So we wanted to make sure that the bylaw was in its final form before we started estimating the costs. If it is at least how we were looking at it. So we know exactly what we're enforcing.
Thank you. We were going to talk about fees. Councilor Rodriguez, then I'll go to Councilor Bowden. And we'll come over to the side after.
Okay, so when we were looking at the comparisons, I found that some of them were a little bit heavy. Operate without a license. Of course, we want that fine to be having. I think $900 was kind of what the other jurisdictions were doing, somewhere in that range. I thought that might be more appropriate. Although I did have a question. And I think I asked it the last time about, and I think you mentioned how the courts decide or somebody. Pardon?
The courts approve fines, yeah.
Courts approve fines. So I assume they do that based on what's normal practice. In other areas, I'm not sure. Better. Is there kind of established guidelines on?
There's not. It's up to the justice if they feel the fine is appropriate for in the text of the bylaw. So they review the bylaw, they look at your fines, they determine if the fines that you set are appropriate. And the idea of that number one item on the fine list was we hope nobody may ever have to fine them that, right? It wants to be a non-attractive fine
Yes.
so that they're more encouraged to, I should just pay the 750 or whatever the fee is for the license. It's like a double penalty, no different than your permits. If somebody builds without a permit, they still have to get a permit, but they're also paying double.
Okay. So that's how you came to that.
More or less, they will still have to pay that fine and then they would be subject to the fee in order to get a license, is our mindset so far in this draft.
And I didn't see really any consideration being given to principal owner occupant, sorry. I feel like especially go back to remember the lady coming in saying how she rents out a room in her house and in order because she wants to be able to afford to stay and I feel like when it's owner occupied, which is what a lot of people who came to us with their concerns actually liked that, that they should be given some sort of reduced fee because they are on property. And I know, I think some other jurisdictions do accommodate that. I didn't know whether it could be considered.
Clerk, do you want to respond to that?
Sure. It was considered, it was discussed. From an administrative standpoint, we discussed, it's the same work for licensing. Or whether it's owner occupied or not. Council can direct that fee be reduced for those people. But looking at administrative to cover our costs, the fire inspection's the same, the building inspection's the same, like all that's the same. So we want to cover those costs.
And I think that was pretty much it.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Bolgen?
Thank you, Worship. I guess before I forget, just building off just what Councilor Rodriguez just said, I guess the alternative there too is just owner occupied exemption. So there is no admin where if you owner occupied, you don't get a license. How I envisioned it, because I don't think that person who came to speak to us is not the one renting their cottage on the lake. They're living in the house. So I always saw that owner occupied exemption from the program in my mind. So that's just another alternative. That way they don't have to apply for a license, they just. Owner occupied that.
B&B.
Bed and breakfast essentially, yeah.
Yeah.
So my question on the fines, and I know, Mr. Spansky, I know you mentioned that, cart before the horse kind of thing. When I think of this, where we end up, it's gonna cost money. We're gonna have to hire somebody. We're gonna need staff if we pass this bylaw as is. Our staff don't have the capacity to run a program like this. So there's gonna be costs associated with it. And in my mind, that needs to be a cost recovery program. I don't think the regular ratepayer should be paying for a program that regulates people making money renting their houses. So that's why I am a little concerned without having any idea of the financial impacts of this program to even approve it in principle. Because that's gonna be the first question at a public open house is, well, who's paying for it and how much is it gonna cost? So when I think of figuring out how much a license costs, I would go to how many do we have, or do we think we have? And how much is this program gonna cost? And how much do we charge a license fee to be a self-recovered program? That's why I'm a little hesitant without knowing the costs, because I think it should be recouping the costs associated with it. And then that might mean that we have to make adjustments to the bylaw to make it more enforceable and less expensive. So that's kind of where I was in terms of approving the license fee as whatever, because it just seems like we picked an average, which is fine, but it should be specific to how much our program costs, in my opinion. That's kind of all I had on the fees. Thank you.
Mr. Vasia, before we go to that side of the room, do you have anything to add on the fees?
They covered it. Thank you.
This, like the deputy, anything on the fees?
No, nothing, thanks. You wouldn't entertain my other ideas, so no, really, I don't have any comments on the fees.
Councilor Van Clapper?
I have nothing further to add there.
Councilor Wolvette, that I do call on his landline.
I thought you come over by horse there. In general, some pretty good points made there about owner occupied. I like those words exemption. Not everybody's renting out there in the lake. So I like that owner occupied exemption part of it. I also like the part that taxpayers shouldn't be putting one penny towards this bylaw, for sure. This is to do with people that are running, we talked about commercial businesses, trying to make money off of their investment. That's who should be paying. This is gonna get expensive when we start talking about building inspectors, we start talking about fire chiefs, and we're talking all that kind of stuff. Somebody's got to pay for that kind of stuff. I know even in the fire services, we got to send a chief over to every time somebody wants an inspection on their short-term rental. We better have something in the budget for the fire department where money's coming back to pay for that, because it all costs money. It's all administration. So people that are renting these out for the big bucks, and their corporations and organizations, they should be footing the bill, as far as I'm concerned. So as far as all the other rates go, I see you've averaged them, $700. I think that's a lot of money for the individual, a couple individuals that I'm talking about, owner occupied, that's a lot of money. It's not a lot of money for somebody's renting out something out there at the lake for $2,500 a night. So, there is a difference there. So, and I know for what Aaron said there about keeping it consistent makes it a lot easier for staff and stuff, but sometimes that isn't always fair neither, to people that just don't have as much money and not making as much money off the rental. So the rest of the fees, you've averaged them out. Yeah, I don't have a lot to say about them. I mean, you've went to different municipalities and looked at what they're charging. I'll just leave it there.
Thank you. It's not any further comments from you before we move on?
If I may, when we get into costs and expenses, there is a definition that we are going to put in the bylaw. We talked about if it's what council's wishes. If we look at 12.5, it talks about when an order is issued. So if someone's in violation of your short-term rental bylaw, it's the same as our property standards and tidy yard. The inclusion is in there that they would be billed back for all the time associated, any costs or expenses associated with the order. If it's showing up and reminding someone, about the garbage bins, it's usually we're already in the area doing building inspection anyhow. So it would be while we're out in the area. And then if the orders would be issued if someone's in violation, we will need to follow up in that regard and it would be billed back. That was our intention.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And I appreciate that. I still think we're gonna need a staff member to run the program though, even if everyone was perfect. Someone's gonna be looking through these applications, looking through these site plans. So even if you have someone that never needs an order. I don't know, I don't know if we have the staff for that, right? Because they've got to review everything that comes in. Work with them to make sure they all come in. So there's gonna be a cost associated with staff in addition to recouping costs, which is good to have in there like that.
We could rely on our CEO to give us that information when.
Well, and like I said, we're gonna be bringing in council a full cost analysis of the program. Which will include the actual cost of the program, so you can get an idea what you need for fees. But we're planning to do that after we've gone through the ZBA and the OPA process. That way, council felt that they wanted to stop the process, change the process, they can. We're not endorsing the bylaw until at the very end of the process, when we've worked out all the kinks, if you will, and we have a full understanding of costs associated with the program at hand.
Ms. Burke, anything from you? Further?
Not at the moment, your worship.
Okay,
Adam covered it well.
Melanson? Council, yes, Council Wabed.
Just like to go back to Mr. Bojan's comments on the official plan. Amendments and bylaw amendments. I believe I heard you say that other municipalities have not had to do any of that. Well, I heard what Ken said and appreciate it, but if others haven't had to do that, go into it and make change the official plan stuff. Why do we have to? If they've done it legally, why do we have to do it? So I think, am I missing something here? Like for what you said, Alex?
I think the biggest, and I'm gonna have to look to the planners to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think. The problem, if you want to look at it as being a problem here, I think the Band-Aid fix that was done previous. Is forcing us to do this.
Yes, correct.
So because there was a Band-Aid fix done in previous years to try to address it. It's now made too specific, whereas other municipalities, they didn't do a temporary Band-Aid fix to kind of get something done. I think that's what's happened
Are
here.
you looking for a planner, John? That is exactly the answer.
But I'm looking at. Some of the comments are made, but there's other businesses, several other businesses, lots of other businesses operating within this community. And I don't recall us doing any official plan amendments to allow them to operate. That's why I'm asking the question. It's, we're talking commercial here and if we haven't had, they haven't had to meet any of these requirements. Why would a corporation or a commercial short-term rental have to make us change it?
Maybe go to Mr. Sabansky for that response, if I may.
So, Councilor Wolver, you may have to help me along here because I heard two different parts in one. At first, we started out talking about OPAs.
Yeah.
Again, the OPA has to be amended. We got too specific when we did our whole amendment. And now those specific changes are going against what you as council wished for.
Oh, I see.
And then the second one, if I'm gleaming it correctly, is you're right, Plympton-Wyoming does allow home-based businesses without an official plan amendment, without zoning bylaw amendment, because that is what council's prerogative has been through those policies. It has been council's direction that we want to regulate STRs. There has been no direction to regulate home-based businesses, but you have provided us clear direction to regulate short-term rentals.
If you don't mind, Mr. Mayor, one other thing, we discussed it the last time we had this discussion, it was these mini homes or Bill 23, I guess it boils down to Bill 23, where you can have three different residents on your property. So somebody puts one of these mini homes in their backyard. We had this discussion. I'm not exactly sure where it ended up. Could they rent those out for a short-term rental? Or if you took an accessory building like their garage, fix it up, could that be rented out as a short-term rental? As well as the 4 bedrooms in their home, if they're owner occupied. Here's how the provincial government has said it's legal to have 3 different buildings or units on your property. And I don't know, I'm not sure where we ended up. I know Mike and I had a discussion. I think we didn't think we would want that these smart, because you can have one moved in a couple hours, transport backs in, unloads it, and hooks into your sewer and your hydro. So I don't know where we ended up there, because this could end up an issue. I think we do have a short-term rentals out my way that actually there's an accessory building that's rented out as a short-term rental. 2 units in there. So I'm just wondering where this is gonna be in this.
Sure, if I can go to our deputy clerk for comment.
So the way the bylaw is worded right now, the wording is that no person shall operate more than one short-term rental per property. So they would only be able to rent out either the whole entire home or one of those accessory units. And if they did that, I guess it would be a discussion, would it be classed as owner occupied if the owner lives on that premises? And then in terms of when you were talking about, where they can have them, section 2.2 speaks to where people cannot have them. So that includes mobile home or trailer. So that can help deal with some of the issues on certain types of modular homes. And they're not allowed in any structure other than a habitable room, which we've defined through the bylaw.
Yeah, it does get complicated with Bill 23 because you could have your home, even if you're owner occupied, you could rent out your bedrooms. You'd rent your mini home out back for over 28 days. That wouldn't be classified as a short-term rental. You could rent out your garage, it was fixed up for over 28 days, and that would not be classified as a short-term rental, but your house would be if you're renting it out owner occupied short-term rental night by night.
And it actually, your worship, it gets even more complicated, and this is exactly why the OPA needs to be amended. Because your Band-Aid solution says you cannot allow an additional dwelling unit to be a short-term vacation rental, so now you have a conflict.
Yes.
And I think what you're seeing, counselor, is our attempt to try to thread the needle, because there's issues on both sides of the coin, right? You allow short-term vacation rentals to be in an additional dwelling unit? Or do you say no, because you want to have them for what I would call long-term rental, which would be someone moving to town needs that for a year or two to then get established, to then find their permanent home. Or maybe that unit is their permanent home too. That's always an option as well. I do want to go back to your comment just to add to what Mr. Sabansky was saying. Keep in mind, counselor, about home-based businesses, that your official plan has policies in it. And you have zoning bylaw regulations related to home-based businesses, because the whole idea is to establish that if I want to create a home-based business and I'm a use that could be considered that, I know when I've crossed the line beyond a size and number of visits and activity that is appropriate to a residential area. Because what you're trying to do is say, well, yes, you could have a hair salon in your basement, because you're not creating a huge amount of commercial activity like the bigger sort of commercialized hair salons with 10 or 15 stylists and having hundreds of visits a day. You're catering more to a specialized, my friends and their friends know, and that sort of thing. But you're trying to define a box that, okay, now you're at 100 visits a day. Okay, that's getting beyond what is reasonable to have a small little home-based activity happening in your home, and you've now moved away. Once you get into more commercial activity, when it comes to short-term vacation rentals, that's when it would end up in a commercial zone and be like a hotel or what have you. And that's a whole different story. But you start with policies in your official plan already for those things. So you wouldn't need an official plan amendment because it was already there to begin with.
Get complicated.
Yes. Incredibly.
Anything further on this?
Me, sir.
All right, I'll read the motion again, because it's been a while. Moved by Counselor Van Claveren, seconded by Counselor Wolbeck. That the report by Randy Burke, planner, and Kenneth Melanson, manager of planning and development services, County of Lambton regarding short-term rentals, official plan and zoning bylaw amendments be received. That council directs staff to prepare the required official plan, zoning bylaw amendments for the required public meeting.
Can I have a recorded vote on this, please?
Yes, you may.
Read that again. please.
Yes. I'll read it again. Councilor Wilbett has asked for it to be read. That the report by Randy Burke, planner, and Kenneth Melanson, manager of planning and development services, County of Lambton regarding short-term rentals, official plan and zoning bylaw amendments be received, and that council directs staff to prepare the required official plan and zoning bylaw amendments for the required public meeting. Everybody clear on that? Clerk, would you like to record the vote?
Counselor Van Claveren,
Yes.
Counselor Flosion,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor McEwen,
No.
Counselor Rodriguez,
Yes.
Counselor Wolbett,
Yes.
Counselor Vasey,
Yes.
Mayor gets the final vote.
Yes. Okay, that motion carries.
Please support.
Almost as much as Okay, council, let's go to item 6.2. Motion by Council Bojan, seconded by Council Vasey. That the report by Aaron Kawarchuk, clerk, dated October 20th, 2023, regarding building permit fee review be received. And that council directs staff to proceed with option 2, to bring forward an amended bylaw for their consideration at a public meeting as per the procedure outlined in the Building Code Act. Kawarchuk is present with us. Council, you've had a chance to review that. Are there any questions? Councilor Rodriguez.
I don't have questions. I would just like to say it's we did a lot of work here and very, very good. I mean, if that's what needs to be done, that's what needs to be done. Right? We're taking from some reserves. Can't really read it so tiny. What do we do with those reserves?
So the reserves are set up for exactly this instance. It's a building permit fee reserve. Just the money goes in there and is held for the rainy day,
Okay.
which we had a big rainy day. So our concerns are that we could keep pulling from that, riding the wave, it will go down, but when are we replenishing?
Mhm.
And the fees are not reflective of cost recovery, and we're almost 10 years out from the fees being passed before.
Yes, and I can see some of the fees like where you have your ebb and flow in those highs and lows of cost recovery. A lot of those other fees aren't even being used to help offset. So that's part of the problem too.
Yeah.
So, no, great job. What you need to do.
Any further questions, comments? Councilor Wolbett.
And option number 3 there, regardless of what council's decision is regarding the fees or some other updates the staff would like to provide. The building permit law such as the one I'm questioning, increase the deposit to encourage builder to meet set conditions. Are we having a problem with that?
Can I
Clear.
clarify one thing?
Yeah, clerk.
Sorry, and maybe it's the way my report is written. That's not a part of option 3.
Oh.
It's the next paragraph. So I just want to make sure option 3 is stay status quo and do nothing. So then my next paragraph is separate, saying, even if you do decide to do nothing, we still want to change wording. The difference is the fees have to be updated as per the Building Code Act. The changes in there, which Mr. Savansky and I discussed, that's more public works changes. would be just a bylaw update. They wouldn't require the whole public meeting as per fees, but Adam can speak to, yes, if we're having a problem with that.
Mr. Sabansky?
Through the chair, if I may, yes, sir, Councilor Wolva, we've had a number of issues where builders have walked away from a site, refusing to fix the problem. And in those situations, we have provided the deposit that the builder provided to the landowner, so they could use it to rectify the problem or to go to Terry on to force a resolution to the situation. You'll also recall that we've had a lot of complaints in regards to grading of late, and that is the biggest comment from those builders. It's not worth fixing if you might also just take my $1,000. So
That's what it is.
it is absolutely certainly not high enough to promote compliance.
What do you, are you proposing another figure? What are you thinking of?
I'd want to research the
Yes.
surrounding municipalities to make sure we're not putting ourselves out of the market and that we're being fair, but it needs to increase at least to promote a little bit better compliance, if you will.
Yeah, we've dealt with some of those issues. Thank you, sir. That's all I have on that.
Any further questions? Call for the vote. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you, clerk. Okay, we'll go to item 7, bylaws. Anything, clerk, under that?
Looking at this.
Item 8, correspondence. Anything new that hasn't been added to that?
Nothing for action required and nothing in addition for the next.
Okay.
recommended.
Motion, sorry, council, we're going to 9.1 on your agenda. Moved by Deputy Mayor McEwen, seconded by Councillor Van Claveren, that correspondence items A to E relating to recommended reading and routine approval and information items not otherwise addressed by resolution be noted as received by the Plympton-Wyoming Council and filed accordingly. Also, you've had a chance to look at that. We have some of the Committee of Adjustment notices and decisions, as well as several other items. Anything that you'd like to pull or anything to my right? Nothing? My left? Nothing? Okay, call for the vote. All those in favor? Here. Okay, new business for planning, beginning on my left. Councillor Wolvet, anything new under planning? Councillor Van Claveren?
Nothing for me, sir.
Deputy Mayor?
Nothing.
Councillor Rodriguez?
I did have a question.
Sure.
The Blue Point Lookout subdivision, I see there's activity starting up again. So are things starting to move along there now, or? I feel like some of the ones that are going up are still part of phase 1 or phase 2.
The development of the clubhouse?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure. I don't have an answer for you.
It's not.
We have issued permits. We issued the 3 permits earlier this year. And our understanding is they are actively recruiting for construction workers and that we're to see more permits come in here shortly. Yes, just phase 1 so far.
Still phase 1. Thank you.
Is that all, Councillor?
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Bailey?
Nothing at this time, your worship.
Councillor Bojan?
Nothing for me, thank you.
All right, we'll move to, we have nothing under close this evening, clerk?
No.
Okay, we'll go to item 12.1. I have a motion by Deputy Mayor McEwen, seconded by Councillor Van Claveren, that bylaw 117. 2023 being a bylaw to confirm all resolutions of the council held October 30th, 2023, be taken as read 3 times and finally passed, and the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign the said bylaw accordingly. All those in favor? Carried. Council, before we adjourn, I want to thank our planning department for their work that they've done, as well as our staff in getting us to where we're at tonight. I'd also like to recognize and welcome back our planning technician, Lisa. Thank you for being with us again tonight, and to our deputy clerk for her input this evening as well. I will share with you, although we don't have a council meeting until after, but November the 5th is one of our first Remembrance Day services in Kamlaki for 11 o'clock sharp. But if you're going, try to be there at 10:30. And then we'll have a meeting probably before our November the 11th here in Wyoming, which I understand there's a special guest speaker that day. So if you're available, you'll enjoy it. That's all that I have for this evening, council, and a motion by Councillor Vaizey, seconded by Councillor Rodriguez, that the regular planning meeting be adjourned until the next regular planning meeting on Monday, November 27th, 2023, commencing back at 5 o'clock. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you.